This interview is being tape recorded at Colchester Police Station. I am Philip Norton, a detective constable from the Central Detective Unit at Chelmsford. The date is Friday the 17th of the 5th, 96. The time is now 16:08 hours. I'm here to interview Michael Steele. Michael, just give your full name and address and date of birth, please. I'm Michael John Steele, Colchester. My date of birth is the 13th of the 1242. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you fail to mention something when questioned, which you later rely on in court. Anything you say may be given in evidence. Do you understand that? Yes. Your right to continue, Michael. The right to seek legal advice free at any stage. Do you understand that? Yes. You've had a few hours now rest since the last interviews. Are you happy to be interviewed at this stage? Yes. And I believe you've been in with a solicitor now for the last hour and 45 minutes. Could you confirm that? I couldn't confirm the actual time because I haven't been looking at my watch. Okay, it's about approximate. I wouldn't like to. It would surprise me if we have been here for an hour and 45 minutes. It would surprise me. I don't want to be picky on the time, but it's over an hour and a half. The other police officer in the room is DC Shakespeare, Essex Police Central Detective Unit based at Chelmsford headquarters, and Mr. Bowen. I'm Christopher Bowen, a solicitor with Jeeps & Sons here in Colchester. I'm now going to explain my role once again is to advise Mr. Steele throughout the interview. Since the last two interviews, or since the last interview should I say, I've received no further disclosure from the police. As a result, my client intends to exercise his right to silence at this interview. I must say again, and re-emphasise for the benefit of the tape, which will be listened to during court proceedings at a later stage, my client has totally lost confidence with the police investigation. Continually, the defence has asked for proper disclosure, given the extreme seriousness of the allegations against Mr. Steele. Our request has met with deaf ears. It's plain from the second interview today that the police do have detailed information that they could give to the defence in advance of the interviews. They chose not to do so. Accordingly, the defence made the necessary representations and continued to make the necessary representations and followed legal advice. Mr. Steele, as I've already said will exercise his right of silence at this interview also and at further interviews until proper disclosure is given to us when matters can be reconsidered. Before the start of this interview, I say again, no further disclosure has been offered. As a result, I have advised Mr. Steele personally that he should answer no questions. I see no good reason why proper disclosure has not been given to the defence. In the interest of justice, given the seriousness of these allegations, the defence should have made aware the strength of the evidence. At the present time, even though certain matters have now come to light, we're still not aware of the full strength of the evidence. The defence has been misled in this case and information has been withheld accordingly. As a direct result of the disingenuous police approach, my client will answer no questions. I ask you to respect this decision. One final thing I want to say, during the second interview we had today, it's right to say there was some confusion amongst the investigating officers regarding evidence against Mr. Steele. All I can say is if the investigating officers have had confusion, it is even harder for the defence to make an accurate assessment of the strength of the evidence, and again, that's another reason why my client will exercise his right to silence. If the prosecution, the police officers have difficulties with confusion, well, it makes my job terribly difficult, Mr. Steele's job an impossible task. Again, I'm sorry I've had to go into this at such length, but it's absolutely necessary if I'm to properly represent my client's interests. I thank you for your patience, and now let you begin to ask your questions again. Michael, we do intend to continue asking questions, pointing out the evidence in the case and pointing out the circumstances of the police inquiry, and I will continue to do that during this interview. The police feel that they've given you what we consider to be the fullest appropriate information at every stage during this inquiry, and now we wish to give you a further opportunity of giving your account of the incidences surrounding this inquiry leading to your arrest, and all the incidences in relation to the allegations that have been made against you. Are you happy for me to continue this interview at this stage? Mr. Steele is going to answer no questions, but we appreciate that you have a right to ask questions, and we will remain at this interview as long as you have reasonable questions to ask. All I've got to say about the police view that appropriate disclosure has been given. that I totally disagree with that. A one-page summary is wholly insufficient given the fact you're investigating at least one importation of drugs, possibly more, and a triple murder, which has received much coverage in the newspaper since the murder happened last December. We've asked continuously for information, it's not been given to us, and we dispute what the police say. I just want to make that clear, but please do begin asking questions. Right, okay. As I pointed out at the beginning of this interview, you've now had an hour and a half with your solicitor, you've had a break for lunch, prior to that you've had an interview with us, and prior to that a first interview of the day, and between those interviews you've had a chance to consult with your solicitor. Would you accept that? We say that at all times during this inquiry you have been given access to your legal advisor at your request. That has never been denied to you, and in fact we have the right to deny you that, and that's been made available to you at every stage, and your solicitor has been very prompt in his attendance at this police station at every time that has been indicated to him that he should do so. So I must point out to you, Michael, where we stand at the moment in relation to these interviews. As you know, and as you've been advised by your legal advisor, the situation in relation to the caution of suspects at the police station during police interviews changed. Under Section 34 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, the words not only of the caution changed, but the circumstances in which it should be given and what happens to interviews after those cautions are given had dramatically changed. The Crown Court judge now has the opportunity of directing a jury in a Crown Court trial in relation to any interference that he believes the jury could be fairly air to consider in certain circumstances during any court trial. These interviews may form part of the court trial at some subsequent date, and therefore any silence or no comments given during the police interviews can be, in certain circumstances, be used by the Crown Court judge to ask the jury to consider certain interferences. Do you understand that? Okay. As I say to you, the police feel that as it was deemed necessary, certain facts have been disclosed to your solicitor in order that it can advise you and seek your advice during the times that you've had with him. We took the unusual steps of even preparing a written summary to give him prior to your first interview to assist in that procedure. We have constantly been bombarded by your solicitor in relation to the conduct of these interviews. We at all times have attempted to be reasonable and seek justice in this case, and have a duty to put questions to you on behalf of the public, and we have a duty to seek out the truth. That's all we intend to do, and all we are attempting to do. I must make this clear before we start. Now, if you have no observations, I intend to continue this interview as we have done on the previous interviews, pointing out to you certain new things that will not be known to your solicitor at this stage. Are you happy for the interview to continue, Mr. Bowen? My client doesn't wish to be here. The custody record, which will be able to be looked at in future court hearings, will bear that out. We made representations that Mr. Steele doesn't want to be here. He wants to be back at the magistrate's court and not here. He doesn't want to take part in any further interviews. We made that clear in his first interview after he was remanded into local custody. He's going to sit here and say nothing. It's not a case of is he happy to be interviewed. If he wasn't going to be interviewed in this particular interview room, I can confirm it. Superintendent Story told me this morning during a telephone call that recording equipment will be taken into his cell. That's correct. So whatever. I'm grateful for you answering that with the affirmative. Whatever he feels is not going to make any difference at all. He doesn't want to be interviewed. He's not happy being here. He's not happy at the way that the police inquiry has been run. I want to say that the police inquiry has been run by you officers. It's been run by more senior officers. It's the approach taken, an investigation that we object. Now, as far as one of the things you've said is this, that you've taken the unusual step of providing a briefing note. I agree that briefing notes aren't usually given, but I've been provided with more disclosure by police in a domestic burglary than I have in this case. PCs, ordinary PCs, you've more senior officers provide me nowadays since the change in the police caution in April 1995, provide me with detailed statements that have been given. I find it incredible that given the absolute seriousness of these offences, and let us not underestimate the seriousness, I can assure you. I know how much money's been spent. I guess how much money's been spent on this police inquiry. The police take it very, very seriously. Given that seriousness, I find it beyond belief that the only information I've been given is a one-page A4 sheet of typed information, no statements, nothing, and that information has been brought up in this interview, which my question to you was, with respect, and time is cracking on, if we could continue with this interview. Yes, please do, but I just want you to be aware he's not happy at being here, we don't want to be here, and he's not going to answer any questions, but we understand you have a right to ask, and I hope you appreciate that I respect that. And I can now continue. Please do. Thank you very much. Right. I've taken time to explain to you, Michael, the situation as we regard it. I would invite you now that after some lengthy interviews and after you've been given a substantial amount of information on the previous interviews, is there any comment that you wish to make in relation to anything that has been said to you by the police officers at this time? If there's any lawful reason that you can tell us in relation to any of these activities that we've suggested to you that were illegal, that you can give us, then this is your opportunity. We allege that you was involved with others in what we describe as the bad cannabis conspiracy, a conspiracy to import controlled drugs into this country between the 1st of November to the 21st of November 1995. Were you involved in that conspiracy? Did you arrange the murder of Patrick Tate, Anthony Tucker and Craig Rolfe? Were you present during their deaths? I'll move on from there and state that on the 9th of the 11th 95, Patrick Tate was released from custody at Southend Police Station after being arrested after an incident involving Tony Tucker's Porsche motor vehicle. Patrick Tate on release used the mobile phone of Craig Rolfe to phone your home address. At that time, can you confirm to me that you was in custody with Customs and Excise and been arrested earlier that morning in relation to your boat being seen on the beach at Felixstowe? Is that correct? Are you aware of a phone call that Mr. Tate made to your home address whilst you was in custody? Who would have been present at your house at that time? Has any other person, apart from Jackie Street, got control of your premises? On the 6th of the 12th 95, in confirmation of Darren Nichols' evidence that a phone call was made from the Little Chef at the halfway house on the A127 to Patrick Tate's mobile phone, I turned to the information of Donna Jaggers. I confirm Donna Jaggers is not a name I've heard. It's not a name you've heard before? Thank you. Donna Jaggers is the girlfriend of Craig Rolfe. She has a daughter by him. She states she's informed police of her relationship with Craig Rolfe and subsequently Anthony Tucker and the relationship between the three of them. Are you aware of who Donna Jaggers is? Have you met her before? She knows you. She knows you as Mickey the Pilot, otherwise known as Mickey Steele. Would you agree you're known as Mickey the Pilot and you have a pilot's license? She describes you attending Longwood riding stables in Basildon driving your RAV4 motor vehicle, the Toyota, where you meet Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. You hand a bag to Anthony Tucker, is that correct? The bag was taken away by Jaggers and Rolfe, and Jaggers would say that later she discovered the cannabis resin bars were in that bag. Did you hand that cannabis resin to Tony Tucker in that bag? Were you concerned in the supply of the cannabis to them? She will say that in November 95, £60,000 was put together in relation to a cannabis importation in which you had organised with them to import into this country using your boat. Craig Rolfe had gathered £7,000 together. He took that to the house of Tony Tucker in Fobbing. On leaving Tony Tucker's premises, where the money had been handed over, Donna Jaggers sees you coming up the path towards the address. She recognised you. She knows you. Would you accept that? Have you any comment to make in relation to that? And she is aware that 2 days after that you was arrested on the beach by the Customs, which would indicate that that meeting took place around the date on the 6th of November 95. She can also confirm that Patrick Tate was arrested and will say in evidence that at 1800 hours the same day she went with Rolfe to Southend Police Station and picked Tate up. She will say that he used Craig Rolfe's mobile telephone to phone your home address. Are you aware of that telephone call? Have you been informed of its contents? The phone call was in relation to the cannabis resin, and on completion of the phone call, she will say that he was happy due to the fact that cannabis resin was secure and safe, intimating that it had not been recovered by the authorities. Is it true there's a statement signed? Sorry, interrupt at this point. Is it true there's a statement from this lady, Donna Jaggers? There is a statement in relation to her evidence, yes. Do you know any reason why Superintendent Story won't disclose that to me? I'm not prepared to discuss that at this time. Okay, thank you. But it hasn't been disclosed to you. You can confirm that, thank you. My question is to you, have you been aware of the substance of the phone call? And the question would be, who was at your house to receive that call and have the knowledge to inform Patrick Tate that the cannabis resin was secure? Can you answer those questions? She will say that Rolf took his share of the cannabis resin to another supplier in the Golders Green area of London, but soon after was receiving calls in relation to its poor quality. She will confirm that Tate, Tucker and Rolf became agitated at this. Can you confirm not only that you supplied them with the poor cannabis, but upped the price at the same time, increasing your share of the profits? Can you confirm they began to put pressure on you to take the cannabis back? Can you describe the pressure that they put you under, and in what form did it take? She will say that you subsequently relented and agreed to take the cannabis back in order that a refund could be arranged with the people that you received the cannabis from in the first place. The bars of cannabis that were returned to you were broken by Patrick Tate. She will say that on the 17th of 11th 95, Barry Dorman, Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe, Barry Dorman's wife and 3 girls travelled to Ostend. She did not travel that time due to the fact she knew what was occurring and why they were travelling, that they were going to receive money back from you. She will say that on the return she was made aware that you had begun a further conspiracy to organise 30 kilos of cocaine being imported into this country, and that you also entered into a conspiracy with those persons to rob, I think that's the expression, the people that you were getting the drugs from. Can you confirm this is what you were doing at the time, entering into a further conspiracy, and in fact, your part in that was to land the drugs by plane at an airstrip in the south of Essex? She will say that as far as she is aware, Tate and Tucker planned to trick you in relation to the cocaine. Are you aware of that? Are you aware of any plot by them to have you over, to cut your cocaine 3 kilos to 7 of impure? Were you made aware of that fact? She will say on the 6th of December, the day of the murder, she received a phone call from Craig stating that you'd made contact with Tucker and that all 3, Craig Rolfe, Patrick Tate and Tony Tucker, going to meet you later on that evening. She was in fact dropped by Lakeside by Craig in the Range Rover at 17:45 that day. He was going to pick up Tate and Tucker and they planned to come and meet you. Is there anything you'd like to say in relation to the information laid before you now from Donna Jaggers? All I'd like to say is that again, my client isn't going to answer any questions. I cannot understand why the police, if they have this information, have not given this to us previously. We have asked for it time and time again. We're showing a reasonable approach to these interviews. I cannot stress enough the seriousness of these allegations against my client. How can the defence be expected to appraise themselves of the strength of the evidence if it's being thrown at the defence at these interviews? My client will continue to remain silent. I appreciate that decisions of disclosure do not apparently seem to be made by you officers, so I'll make it plain that I'm not complaining that you're not showing me the information. I appreciate your acting on instructions from your senior officers, but I cannot understand why Superintendent Story won't make disclosure to me when I've asked for it time and time again through you. I've asked you for it directly from him. He won't give it to me. Plainly, there's information here, but it's not being given to the defence in this correct manner. The interests of justice are not being served by this. My client will continue to remain silent, and I do not believe that any court will draw any interference adverse to my client's interest. Thank you. We continue. Yesterday during interview, you read out a prepared statement that you prepared in your own handwriting. Would you agree with that? I confirm for the benefit, because my client won't say anything, the prepared statement was read out by him, yes. Within that, you accepted knowledge of the deceased person, Patrick Tate, Anthony Tucker, and Craig Rolfe. Would you accept that? I'll accept it on his behalf. He's going to say nothing at all. But you will accept he said that. I will accept that was mentioned in his prepared statement. and through your interviews and through the prepared statement, accept that ownership and control of both premises at Anglers Green and Meadow Cottage, London Road, Clacton. Would you accept that? I want to say nothing more. I don't want to answer on behalf of him. I think I've said too much already. Well, you've started to... I'm not answering questions for him. Okay. In that prepared statement, you state that the shotgun at Meadow Cottage would be found not to be the murder weapon. Would you accept that? I would state that can be seen as you accepting that you knew the shotgun was at Meadow Cottage, that you had control of it in your premises, and the fact that you state it was not used in the murder could imply that you had some knowledge about the movement of that weapon, or had some knowledge, and in fact, we say you were present at the time that the three persons were shot dead. Is there any comment you'd like to make in relation to that? These are not issues you can be unclear of, and are not issues that have raised their heads during this interview. That has come from you. Is there anything you'd like to say in relation to these observations in relation to what you've said in your prepared statement? I advise you not to answer that question. Your prepared statement was very clear, Mr. Steele, for a court to make any observations on it now. For you to make anything at this stage, you've made yourself clear in my view. I just wanted to further the point with regard to this interferences really, Mr. Steele, so that you're totally clear what the position is as far as we're concerned. Your solicitor, Mr. Bowen, has, we've heard on a number of occasions, has made representations during the course of these interviews and has complained that not enough details of evidence against you has been disclosed. You should be perfectly clear on that point. You are aware, of course, this is not for us, myself and DC Norton at this stage to decide what information may or may not be evidence at a later date. We would like to re-emphasise the fact that you, Mr. Steele, are entitled, and indeed it is your right now that you've heard specific details of your alleged involvement for us in the conspiracy to import controlled drugs and your alleged involvement in the murder of Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker, to have the opportunity to make any comment whatsoever that you may wish. If you are an innocent man, Mr. Steele, I urge you now to tell us and tell us your side of the story. If you have any explanation at all, having heard the weight of these accusations that have been made against you, you can now tell us in order so that we can investigate your version of these events. I'm turning to you, Mr. Bowen. I would be grateful if you would confirm the bail application that you made at Chelmsford Magistrates Court on Wednesday the 15th of the 5th this week. You made your position clear in so as you've said that there is no point in remanding Mr. Steele to a police station as he would not be answering any questions that were put to him by the police. I have no comments to make. This interview is not for me to answer any questions. I'm not going to make any observations about anything I've done in my professional duty. I'm not being interviewed here. I will not answer any of your questions you put to me of that nature. I don't wish to do so. There is no obligation for me to make any answers. I'm not the person being interviewed, I'm a solicitor. I'd just like to make the point for Mr. Steele's benefit and for ours that these comments you've made in the Magistrates Court at that hearing were obviously made before any details of any disclosure were given to you. You have made your stance perfectly clear, even at that stage. We have one last observation I wish to make before I move on, Mr. Steele, is that on the 22nd of the 12th, 95, the funeral of Patrick Tate was held at Pitsea. Can you give the date of that again? Sorry, I missed it. 22nd of the 12th, 95. Thank you. Were you present at that funeral? Was your wife, your common law wife, Jackie Street, present at that funeral? Did you inform her to tell other persons present at that time to tell people that you were not attending the funeral due to the fact you were answering bail to an allegation that Customs and Excise were making at that time? Did you tell her to say that? Were you aware that she said that? I'm going to conclude the interview there, Mr. Steele, only for a short break, which we wish to inform your legal representation of certain facts that we'll be putting to you in a further interview. Interview concludes 16:42.